Hello everyone, welcome to AWS Tutorials. In AWS Tutorials, we provide workshops and exercises to learn about AWS services. These workshops and exercises are published to our website aws-dojo.com, and you can use these workshop and exercises to implement certain scenarios and learn about AWS services. Today, I'm going to talk about one of the new services launched by AWS. It is called App2Container. This service is used to containerize your applications. So let's get some introduction about this service first. So as I mentioned earlier, App2Container, and as the name suggests as well, it is used to containerize your application. So it is primarily a three-step process, and where in the first step, actually you go and discover your services and analyze your services. So you will go to some application servers where your applications are deployed, and you run this. You use App2Container service to discover the application services deployed on that server and analyze that what it will take to containerize this application. Then you go to the next step, which is actually containerizing the application, and you use certain tools within App2Container to really really extract the application dependency and create Docker image out of the application. And then your third step, where you simply go and deploy. So once you have containerized your application, you use certain tool to deploy your applications. And when you do so, this tool will take care of creating all the deployment artifacts, for instance, creating ECS tasks or launching Kubernetes notepad pods, all those things it takes care of itself. For the deployment, it makes use of CloudFormation. So basically, and for the fact, you can deploy your application on both kind of container services. Either you can deploy on ECS or you can deploy on EKS. So basically, the way it's taught that you have one you can say classically deployed application, and then you use this tool to convert that into a containerized application, where the application has been Dockerized, the Docker image has been stored to ECR, and the application itself has been deployed to ECS or EKS cluster. So from classical to containerized deployment, these three steps of App2Containers take care of this whole process. So it's pretty interesting service, quite new. I'm sure, it will enhance leaps and bounds in coming days. But I played with this service for some of the scenarios, and it works pretty well. Okay, so let's get to know some more detail about this service before we jump onto the scenario which we are going to build today. So what are the supported applications? So as this service is new, the supportability right now is limited to two types of application only, but I'm sure it's going to change and enhance in coming days and weeks and months. Coming time. So, for instance, right now, it's one of the types of application it supports is Java application running on Linux. So a Java application could be running out of Spring Boot or Tomcat or web servers like JBoss, WebLogic, or WebSphere. And then the kind of Linux distribution it supports is all the typical ones like Amazon Linux BOS to your Ubuntu to CentOS to Red Hat Linux. Then other type of application which it supports is ASP.NET application running on Windows. And your ASP.NET application should be running on your Windows Server 2016 or 19. In fact, before 16, the containers or Dockers were not supported on Windows, if I'm not wrong. Your IS version should be 7.5 or later, and .NET Framework 3.5 or later. So as long as you have applications built with this type of frameworks and operating system, App2Container can convert such deployed application into a containerized application. So so even on as I said that to start with, yeah, it looks like a very limited platform support, but guys, this is a new service. Give it some time. I'm pretty confident that AWS will go and enhance this tool to support more frameworks and even in fact add more feature to it. So talking about what is not even supported in these two platforms. So on in Java application, if you are in a cluster mode, then it is not supported. And in ASP.NET applications, if you have no WCF based Windows Communication Foundation based application, or if you're using some kind of service or process outside IS. So if your applications are deployed in IS, then you're fine, but it is going beyond IS, then it doesn't support. Similarly, yeah, there are many other factors. I mean, so I'm not going into detail, but yeah, it's worth knowing what is not supported even on these two platforms. Okay. So let's see if I'm trying to. So suppose you have got an app server where your applications are running, and you want to convert or Dockerize those application for the container-based deployment. What should be installed on that application server? So on the application server where your application is running, of course, I mean, you should have ASP.NET or Java supported application running over there. But other than that, few more things has to be installed on that application server before you can containerize the application running on that server. So first and foremost thing is you should have AWS CLI installed, and then you should have AWS profile configured. So you should have an AWS account, user account. You will generate your access ID and secret key for that user account, and that access ID and secret key you will use to create the profile on that application server machine. Then you want to use you want to have a Docker engine install, a Docker install on that server. And then if it is Windows, then you should have PowerShell version 5.1, yeah, installed minimum. Of course, you need to have your application server running there because this is the application you're going to Dockerize. And then you need a lot of free disk space. In fact, if it is a Linux box or a Linux platform, then 20 GB is sufficient. But if it is Windows, depending on the size of the application you're Dockerizing or containerizing, it should be anywhere between 20 to 30 GB. Okay, so that's the kind of prerequisite you need to have on the application server where you will be using this service. This is actually a command tool based service, so you'll be using this service to containerize your application. So what are we building today? So in order to do some hands-on or play with this service, actually what we did, AWS Dojo has created one AMI, a public AMI, which you can use actually. And this public AMI has got few things already configured so that you don't have to do that. But yeah, if you want to use your own AMI like this, or you want to create a machine like this, then yeah, feel free to do so. But in this case, what we're doing is we have an AMI, which is a Windows 2016 based AMI. On this AMI, we got ASP.NET deployed. Of course, it has IS also deployed on that, and then we deployed a sample web application. And this sample web application we want to Dockerize, containerize using App2Container service. Then it has Windows PowerShell there, and then we also got AWS CLI deployed. In fact, we deployed the latest version 2.0 on that. So we got so this is the a custom AMI we created so that you can use this as an application server where your application is running, and then you will simply configure App2Container service on this AMI based machine to Dockerize or containerize this web application. So basically, process is pretty straightforward. What you do that you launch an EC2 instance out of this AMI, and then you use App2Container service. It's a command line based tool or service to containerize this ASP.NET application. So that's the scenario you are going to implement today. So in order to implement this scenario, we have created a workshop, in fact, exercise, a lab, which is published to aws-dojo.com. The URL of the exercise has been provided in the description box below. And this exercise provides step-by-step process to implement the scenario we just discussed. Now, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to walk you through the steps involved in this exercise. And after that, yeah, you can use this URL as mentioned in the description box to run this exercise by your own and implement this scenario end to end. So let's jump on to the exercise. So here is our exercise. This website, aws-dojo.com, and this exercise has been published over there. These are the certain steps involved to perform the exercise. So let's start from the top. So all you have to do is simply follow the step one by one. So the first step is, of course, to have an AWS account. And if you don't have an AWS account, you can use this link to create one free trial account. The next step is next step describes some of the things I've already mentioned you earlier, that we are providing one AMI which you can use to launch an EC2 instance. And this EC2 instance will work like an application server where you will use App2Container service to containerize your ASP.NET application. And then I just mentioned the same thing I mentioned earlier. This is a 2016 machine. Docker is installed, CLI is installed. In fact, App2Container installation package is also copied over there. So, I mean, I will provide you a link later how you can download a copy, but we made the job simpler for you by simply copying this package itself to the AMI. And then the ASP.NET application is also deployed there. And this is the sample application we are going to containerize. This is the AMI ID, and this is the AMI name. This is a public AMI, which is shared with everyone in the AWS world who can access this AMI to launch an instance with this configuration. So let's get started. The first step is to create an S3 bucket, and this S3 bucket is important here because when you try to deploy the application and it creates deployment artifacts, those deployment artifacts are stored in this S3 bucket. So as I mentioned earlier, that App2Container service uses cloud formations to launch your containerized application on AWS AWS platform, either ECS or EKS. And for that, it needs to create deployment artifacts like your task definitions, or if you're using EKS, then the whole cluster definition, your pod definition, those things it has to create. Those artifacts, deployment artifacts, are created and stored in this bucket. So you create a bucket. We gave this name Dojo A2C bucket. It is in the Ireland region. Okay. And then next step is to create an IAM user. So remember I said that when you are trying to run your A2C on your App2Container on application server, it needs to talk to AWS in order to do deployment and storing files to the S3 bucket. For that, it uses AWS profile based authentication, AWS access key, secret key based authentication. So we need to create one user account whose secret key and access key, access ID and secret key we are going to use to create profile on the application server, in this case EC2, which then will be used by App2Container service to authenticate and work with AWS services. So let's go and launch an AWS an user into IAM. So we launched create this user called Dojo user, and then we only need to give this programmatic access. I'm going to give this administrative access just to make my job simple here, but otherwise, yeah, you want to give some particular services, not this kind of big service access. And then, you simply create the account. It generates your access key and secret key, which you will store. Yeah, you will download and store so that you can use it later when you're trying to configure your profile in the app server. Now we go and launch the EC2 instance. Now we are going to launch the EC2 instance using AMI, which works like application server in this lab, where we have an ASP.NET application installed, which we need to containerize using App2Container service. So in order to do so, we go to EC2 management console, go to the AMIs, click on the AMIs, then we look for public images here, so convert filter to public images, then use AMI name or AMI ID to search for this public AMI, which AWS Dojo is providing, and then we're simply launching it. So it's pretty straightforward. We are launching using one of the instance size over here. We are launching it in a default subnet, that's a default VPC. And then we are auto assigning public IP because we want to actually RDP to this machine, remote desktop to this machine. For that, we are assigning a public IP to it. And then we are giving this, on storage. By default, it takes 60 GB as storage. So we're trying to keep some good storage there because when you try to Dockerize the image, it needs sometimes 30 to 30 GB space of its own. So keeping that in mind, we have given 60 GB as a default storage, which you don't need to change. Simply accept as it is and move forward. Then you go and add name to this server. We are saying it's a Dojo web server. Okay, so and then we define the security group. And in this case, we are saying give us access over RDP. You can restrict it to your own IP address, but for now I kept it. There's nothing secret there, so I kept it open. But you might want to restrict it to your own IP if you are if you want security concern. But basically, you need RDP access to this machine to access, and then you simply launch it. When you launch it, it says, do you want to generate a key pair? You don't need to because we have administrative login and password already for this EC2 instance through the AMI, so we don't need to generate a new key pair. And we say, okay, no, we want to proceed without a key pair, and you launch your instance. So it takes some time. In fact, it's pretty fast now in AWS, even for Windows instances. And very soon your machine will be ready. And then your status, when you know status is ready, when your status check is 2 by 2. That means your host and instance both are good. Then you use this public IP to RDP to the instance over here. You can see we have RDP to the instance over here. And then on that instance, we try to see the local application which you need to containerize, and that applications can be accessed using this URL http localhost dojo web app. So if you access this URL over here, it will show you the default application deployed. Okay, so this is the application we want to containerize. So our application server is up and running. We are connected. Now it's time to do the real action. So first we'll go and install your App2Container server tool over there. So what we'll do is that before doing so, we will go and configure your AWS profile. So in order to configure AWS profile, we simply run this command AWS configure, where we provide your access ID, secret key, your region is Ireland, EU West 1, and the output format is JSON. We simply provide that, and then with that, our profile is ready. Now, your App2Container installation package is copied to C download folder. So what you do that, you go to C download folder and you unzip this one into this C download AWS App2Container installer Windows folder. You simply unzip this folder over here. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that in AMI we have already copied this installer package, but if you're running your own app or web server, then you might want to use this link to download this package and simply copy to your app server. And then we go back to PowerShell command and we move to C download AWS App2Container installer Windows folder. And then there we run this command called .NET install .ts1. And this command will install App2Container on this EC2 instance or application server. Okay, so you install that over here. Once you have installed, then you need to configure your App2Container service. And in order to configure App2Container service, actually you run a command called App2Container init. And when you run this command, actually it will take certain inputs, and the important ones are that it will tell you that what is the default workspace directory. And this workspace directory is where it will keep the whole analysis file, your containerized file, and all those files are created over here. By default, it uses a folder called C users, your login name, app data, local, app2container, but if you want, you can change this location. Then it asks you that which AWS profile you should use. By default, it uses default profile, and we just created default profile in one of the very first steps of this task. And you simply say, okay, go and use the default profile. And the third very important thing is that tell me where you want to keep your application artifact, your deployment artifacts. And here you mentioned the bucket, the S3 bucket you created earlier, so that App2Container knows that this is the bucket I need to keep my deployment artifacts when the deployment starts. Okay, so basically these three configuration I have mentioned here as well, but you do these three configuration, and with this your App2Container is installed, configure, your AWS profile is configured, you can start containerization of your application. So in order to containerize your application, you go to the next step. And the first thing is you might want to know that, okay, what are different applications, services, applications running on this server? And for that, you run this command called app2container inventory. When you run this command, it will list down the applications running on this server. In this case, on IIS default website, we have got only one server running, Dojo web app, which I showed you earlier. So good enough. I mean, it's just one service, but it might happen in certain case that your one application server or web server is running more than one application. In that case, we'll show you the list of those applications over here. Then what is important here is to note down this application ID, because this is what App2Container will take as a parameter to determine which particular application it has to containerize or analyze or deploy, kind of thing. So after we have got the list of the application, which is one in our case, we go and run the next command called app2container analyze, that you want to analyze this application. So basically you're trying to analyze the application, that how this application is made of, and which can be then used for the containerization purposes. So how this application is made of, what are different files it depends on, what is the operating environment, what ports it uses, information like that. So for that, you run a command called app2container application ID, and then you simply provide the application ID you just noted down from here. And when you run this command, it takes some time to finish the analysis, but then it creates an analysis file, and that file is called analysis.json, and this file is copied to your workspace folder. So remember that it configures one workspace folder, and in that workspace folder, it simply copies this, creates this file. And this analysis.json file actually tells you everything about this application and kind of dependency this application has, which has to be taken into account when you are containerizing this application. So next, so it's worth actually opening this analysis.json file, where you can really see what is your physical path, what is your app name, what your app name, what pool it uses, what ports it uses, what IIS version it is using, what features of the IIS it is using. It tells you everything. It keeps accounts of everything, which probably is a tough job to do if you're trying to do it manually. Once you have done that, now you have analyzed your application. Now you want to containerize your application. That means you want to create a Docker image out of the application, and also you want to extract the information about the application which will be used for the deployment purposes. And for that, you run the command called app2container containerize application ID, and then this application ID itself. And once you do that, this command really can take some time to finish. But once you finish running this command, actually, it will create a lot of artifacts in your workspace folder. So it will really extract out your files the deployment files for your application. It will extract out your www root in case of iOS. It creates a Docker file. It creates many dependencies files, even Windows installation file for the deployment. So it really creates a lot. It really creates the whole package, the whole containerization package, which then can be used for the deployment of this application to AWS, either in EKS or in AWS or in ECS. You can also, it has also created this Docker file to create Docker image. In fact, if you go and run this command called Docker images, you can see this Docker image, which is already created and on this box. In fact, you can run this Docker image to test your Dockerized application right away over here. Okay, and at this point of time, guys, you are all set. I mean, because your application has been containerized now. Now you can, if you want, you can go and make changes to your deployment files and those kind of things. There are certain changes possible. There's a very good documentation about that into App2Container service help. But yeah, you are good to go and deploy these applications to ECS or AKS. And in this case, we are not running this, but and the command to do that is called App2Container generate app deployment. And when you do that, actually, this command really takes a long time. But then it will go and create the CloudFormation template for every, now for instance, if you're deploying on ECS, then it will create task definition and all those kind of things. And then it will store that deployment artifact to the S3 bucket, and then it will execute CloudFormation templates to deploy the application on ECS. Similar things it do for the EKS also. In this case, it will of course create a different type of CloudFormation templates for your clusters, for your plots definitions, and then it will use that to complete deployment on the EKS. Now we have not done that step over here to keep the cost low for the exercise, but yeah, I mean, I have run this command and it takes really some good time to finish it, but then it really generates the deployment artifacts, stores into your S3 file, S3 bucket, and then it completes the deployment on ECS and EKS. The end result is that once you finish this step, is that your application, which are running on EC2 instance on IaaS, will start running on ECS or EKS in a containerized environment. And that pretty much finishes the exercise over here, guys. The last step is to go and clean up the resources so that you don't incur any cost post this exercise. So that was all for the exercise. Hope you liked the exercise, and if you like, please click on the like button. I really need encouragement from your side. Please subscribe to our channel. And similar to this exercise, there are many other workshops and exercises published on our website called aws-dojo.com. You please visit our website, go through this catalog of workshop and exercises to implement scenario like what we did today to learn about AWS services. If you have any feedback or comment, please provide us either in the comment box in the YouTube channel, or also, you can also click on the contact us button over here and can provide feedback from our web form. So I look forward to your feedback and comment. Hope you like this exercise, and if you like, please click on the like button. And that's all for today, guys. I'll come back to you very soon with something else, some other service, some other scenario. But for now, hope you enjoyed and hope you like this exercise. Yeah, that's all for today. Have a nice weekend. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.